Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to government for a redress of grievances. The First Amendment. That's pretty good rights we got there in that Constitution, I must say. The First Amendment is a large amendment. So we will simply be focusing on the freedom of speech and freedom of the press contained therein. The American rights of free speech and a free press are integral to our American identity. Most of us cannot imagine America without these rights. In spite of, since the Patriot Act, people saying, you better not say that, you'll end up in Guantanamo. Nonetheless, we still do have the right of free speech and free press. Now, libel, lying about people on purpose and putting it in print, that is not included in that free speech and free press. Slander, ditto. Trying to use it for ill purposes, but in general terms, the freedom of speech is still a guaranteed right to the American people. These rights have, however, been severely challenged throughout the course of American history. During the presidency of John Adams, in fact, the second president. Yeah, that soon after we fought for our independence and fought against the abuses of government against our rights, the Alien and Sedition Act was passed, which forbade the American people and press from saying anything bad about the government whatsoever. Ooh, modern times, we call that a totalitarian regime, my friend. Anyway, so needless to say, thank God that didn't last overly long. It came down during the presidency of Thomas Jefferson and wasn't, in spite of the fact that the press was really extreme in their criticisms of him, he did not curtail their right to print their opinions. Another time in our history was where the right of free speech and free press was curtailed by the government was in 1918. Hold on, what's the name of that act? The government, it was the Sedition Act, again, the Sedition Act, which forbade criticism of the draft. You actually went to prison and did hard time if you said you didn't think the draft was constitutional or any kind of criticism that way. Well, that wasn't too cool at all either. It was a direct violation of the rights written in our Constitution and the Bill of Rights. The very things that Patrick Henry was warning about way back in the day. Anyway, that actually also was finally overturned even after the Supreme Court did uphold it. Anyway, President FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, also had some trouble with the press and free speech. It's a little tricky in this area because you did have people trying to stir up Americans to become communists. You had people trying to stir up Americans to become Nazi supporters, things like that. Dreadful time. However, so that's more of a gray area where I can't just up and just say, that's just wrong to completely curtail freedom of speech. But I can see why they may have thought it was necessary, but still, you end up with a slippery slope there to where you can't be aggravated at the government for raising your taxes without going to jail for it. People talk about this stuff. Doesn't mean they're going to grab a torch and a pitchfork and storm Washington, D.C. either. Anyway, but Roosevelt wasn't taking any chances, apparently. But it was through difficult times in our country. The Patriot Act, again, after some big terrible thing happened, um, the nation in shock, and then this thing gets passed where you got to be real careful, or the government gonna come take you away. It's that kind of fear that hangs over things. That was never intended. With freedom of the press and freedom of speech, we weren't supposed to, as Americans, have that kind of fear anymore. Um, these rights have to be fought for and defended, but you also have to be careful because the world we live in is such that you can't just go around saying any old thing, even if it is your right and it hasn't been repealed. You still have to watch it, but it just means you got to be a little Ben Franklin on the situation and be very clever, harmless as subtle as serpents and harmless as doves. Lord Jesus help us, we need it. Y'all have a wonderful weekend and God bless.